general?
And yes?
Yes.
What's that?
It's hard to hear with, you know what I'm saying? You might have to, yeah, there you go.
Is there anything to be added on to that?
Yeah, we have a resolution to approve the requisitions and authorize the county administrator to sign documents relative thereto.
So move.
And yes?
All right, yes to that.
And then there is, Jeff, do you want to explain in the packet for discussion about the One Ohio Recovery Foundation?
We can wait till the end
Okay,
to talk about that.
all right,
It's on my list.
okay.
Okay, so then the next thing up is our work session with Lauren Kavanaugh. Hi, Lauren.
Good morning.
I'll have to, of course, move this down. Sorry. So I'm here, I have 3 topics I wanted to discuss with the board this morning. One is a continuation of a previous conversation we were having regarding our prevention, retention, and contingency plan, which I am seeking the board's approval on. So in your packet, you should have the changes that were made as well as a matrix update. Since our last conversation, I took some of the feedback that was provided and made some alterations. So I thought I would just kind of go step by step through that, and then please interrupt me with questions if there's anything that kind of stands out that you want further information. In the plan, the biggest changes that I've made are on page 13. I added the definition of employment. Just because we have so many categories of benefits that require employment, I wanted to make sure that that was defined.
So what are we talking about first? This is,
The PRC
It's
plan.
in your packet, Dave.
tell me
Behind number
PRC
2.
plan.
Sure, so yeah, no problem. So that stands for prevention, contention, and
And this is an
contingency.
existing program?
Yes, so we have to renew this biannually, and make any updates or changes, and then get the board's approval on those changes.
And these are using TANF dollars.
This is all TANF funded. It's our crisis-based plan, so it's when, and there is a requirement in this, since it is TANF dollars, that there must be a minor child in the household. And this program is intended to help those that are finding themselves in a crisis situation. And so each county, each of the 88 counties can develop their own PRC plan with certain requirements that must be included, but there is flexibility in terms of the services and benefits that each county can offer based on the needs in their community. So ours has been fairly unchanged for the last several years with just minor additions and changes, and that's really true of this particular plan. I originally had some different categories added, such as mortgage assistance. I've since removed that because there are so many different programs that are out there that are addressing those who are affected by COVID with their mortgage assistance. So I took that piece out. The one thing I did add after our last conversation, per Commissioner Young's suggestion, is there are specific categories that require that we can only assist if that person is employed, such as, for example, automobile repair. If their car needs service so they can get back and forth to work, they may qualify for that through PRC. But there are other categories that do not have an employment requirement, such as housing assistance and utility assistance, for example. So what I added into our plan on page 14 is a requirement for those particular categories with no employment requirement that as long as they don't meet one of our exemptions, they will be required to go to our job readiness classes that are offered over at Ohio Meets Jobs through our partnership with the Aspire program. So I mirrored it after how we do our work requirements for all of our other programs, allowing that if there are circumstances which that individual is unable to attend those classes, they would then be exempt. But if they don't meet an exemption, they're going to be required to do so. Because we obviously want them to find work. There are jobs out there, and we want them to gain those skills. So I did add that to the plan. And we intend, once this is approved, to then make that part of the requirement for those categories where employment is not had by that, those individuals that are applying for assistance. Otherwise, in a few of the categories, increased the dollar amount in contingency, which is kind of our catch-all. Sometimes people's circumstances just don't fit into one particular issue, so we have a contingency section, and I've increased that from $1,500 to $2,000. Sometimes an example of what we find oftentimes is if we have a family who has children in the household and there's a safety issue in the home, perhaps there's a repair that needs to be done, and without it, that could impact the family and the children's safety. That would be a contingency example. So this is saying that we would pay up to $2,000 to meet that, whatever that crisis might be, whatever's needing to be addressed. And I also increased our rent assistance from $1,500 to $2,500. Just based on what we're seeing with the cost of rent, the average cost of rent in our county. Increased utility from $750 to $1,000. And then I did leave in the plan that I had submitted back, I guess that was about a month and a half ago perhaps. I left in the automobile insurance assistance, the license plate and vehicle registration fee assistance, as well as short-term payment of auto loan or lease assistance, all of which do require that the individual is employed, and that in order for us to assist with any of these three items, it must be because without that assistance, they would not be able to then continue their employment. And so those are the new additions to the plan that we had not previously, benefits that we had not previously offered. And on page 21, I added a further definition of kinship caregiver, which is a big part of our plan. We do a lot to assist our kinship caregivers in the county with their different needs. And then the other addition is on page 26 of the plan. The state provided an additional allocation of about $163,000 to Warren County for COVID response program. And so I have added that into the plan. It would cover such things. It's obviously related to those affected by COVID. It can assist with anything from housing, utility. We did add burial cost assistance. We've been getting phone calls about that. And so we did add that in there. And just kind of those needs that have come about as it relates to COVID. There is a mortgage assistance piece that we did add into that specific COVID response. And so that I'm seeking approval to have that added to our plan so we can start utilizing those funds to help those impacted by COVID.
What is the federal poverty level?
For this program, it's at or below 200% of the federal poverty level.
What is that number? Ballpark?
It depends on the number of people in your household. Let me pull, I actually have, not that particular. Bear with me, I can give you a ballpark. So for example, I brought the 175% of federal poverty because I'm going to talk about that when I talk about child care assistance, but for a household, we'll say of two, 175% is $30,000. So 200% is just going to be a tad bit more than that as an annual
So around
income.
20,000?
Yes, probably about 28,000 sounds about right to me for like a family of two, for an example. Typical for a PRC plan statewide is that most, if not all, their categories that counties utilize are looking at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. We can go lower, we just cannot go higher than that. So, does that make sense? The changes and additions, questions you may have? Just to give you a little, I brought some numbers. So this, as of November of 2021, since I'm still inputting December's numbers in PRC, we have spent $98,406. And the vast majority of that is our kinship caregiver program, which has actually been recognized statewide as one of the most successful kinship caregiver programs. Year-to-date, we've spent $88,000 plus, a little bit more than $88,000, helping our kinship caregivers with things such as the cost of childcare, whether they need to buy clothing when suddenly they're taking care of children they weren't caring for the day before, and just those needs to help make sure that both the kinship caregiver and the children are comfortable and have what they need, so that as the process moves along, if reunification is going to happen with the parents, everybody's got their needs met until that can happen.
Federal poverty levels for the contiguous 48 states for family of 2 is 17,000.
17,000.
Family of 4 is around 26,500.
That sounds about.
Right, so essentially a lot of these programs, if it's 200% of poverty, you know, it's a family making 52 or 53,000. If it's below that for a family of 4, then they're eligible for a lot of this.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's not a big spend here in Warren County, as you just mentioned, it's under $100,000 that we
Absolutely.
actually spend in the PRC in all of these categories,
Right.
with the majority being kinship.
The majority
what I'm
being
hearing you.
kinship, and then our other expenses that come out of the PRC or TNF program, and they are all in this plan, would be our contracts with the Abuse, Rape, and Crisis Center. I know they just changed their name. I have to get used to that. Family Promise, so our shelter, we have a contract with them. Educational Service Center to put resource coordinators in each of our schools is our largest contract at just over $800,000, which is TANF funded, and I think those are our major contracts. So really how we spend our TANF dollars, the majority of them is through contracting with other organizations who have a need for those funds. Because Warren County is just very different, and we would not be spending those dollars if it wasn't for those contracts.
That's the beauty of the TANF block grant, is that we're able to tailor those resources in a way that makes sense for the community.
For our community, yes,
One size does not fit all.
yes.
Do we need to accept your changes today?
If the board would like, I would greatly appreciate that, so we can utilize this new plan as we move forward.
Well, I appreciate you listening to the board. Again, this is what you do, is you're involved with this. I think you're supposed to reflect the nature of the board of what we're trying to do. I was only one person, but obviously you took it into account that we value work in this county.
Absolutely.
And that, especially in this work environment, that
Right.
if you want government dollars, by the grace of God, it's not one of us that could be there for a short period of time, but for an ongoing situation, people need to work.
Right.
And we want to help those most who are trying to help themselves.
Absolutely. And the classes that are offered over at Ohio Means Jobs they're wonderful, and they can really offer some great assistance. And there's options to do it virtually if people need to. So there's so much more flexibility now. It only made sense to add that component, so I was glad that you brought that to my attention, and now it's in our plan.
Very good.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
And a resolution to approve the Warren County Prevention, Retention, and Contingency Plan for the Warren County Department of Human Services.
So moved.
Yes?
Yes,
Wonderful. Thank you.
thank you.
The second topic I'd like to bring to the board, Tiffany asked me to bring it, and I know I had been working with Commissioner Jones on this. I actually had set in front of you, I'm sorry it wasn't in your packet, I didn't quite have it ready in time, but this is my proposal on how to use the ARPA dollars to work with our childcare needs in our community, whether it be assisting parents, our providers, and so I'd like to go over it's kind of a three-tiered plan, trying to really look at each component of where the needs are for childcare. On the first page, you'll see Project 1, and this is the Type B recruitment effort that I'd like to partner with 4C for Children. They actually provided a proposal, which you can find after the third page of that packet. You will find the two-page proposal that was submitted by 4C. What I asked of them is, right now, we have, 4 licensed Type B providers. What that means is we only have 4 people in Warren County who have agreed to work with our publicly funded childcare program and are watching children out of their home. So all of the other options we have are centers. There's a vast need to have more type B providers, obviously, based on that number. So what I'm asking of the 4C group is to assist us with recruitment of type B providers, getting people interested, understanding that they can start a business from their home, and I think now is the time more than ever to target people, because there are many men and women who have chosen to stay home, but maybe they would like to develop a business out of their home, and this can give them that opportunity.
Like all the people that are on the PRC program from the first discussion.
Correct.
If they're looking for
That's a
something now,
potential
we're giving them something.
That is a potential possibility, and, you know, with this program, we would target that group as well, because it's an opportunity. What we've learned over the years with our type Bs is more and more they're asked to have a business and understand how to run a business and understand how to have all their paperwork correct and be very much, it's not just babysitting. It is a business out of your home. And what we were finding is so many people that we had previously that have now left really didn't understand how to run a business and how to do it. So part of this partnership with 4C would be them providing training and resources to the type B providers to help them get set up as a business, understand how to run a business successfully. And they would coach them through all of that. So we have all these different components that I have listed here. There's 5 bullets. It has to do with them coaching our type B providers, training and education, they're going to recruit, and they're going to talk through each of them about what all the requirements are when we come in to do an inspection, because we inspect those type B homes twice a year, and so 4C will help them make sure that their home is safe and will easily pass an inspection of ours, and we'll just offer them continuing support as they build their business in their homes. So this was probably what I think could be one of the most impactful uses of the ARPA money, and and I think it could actually be a model, a statewide model. I don't know of any other county in Ohio who is utilizing any of their dollars to do a recruitment effort, and we are not alone. Other counties are suffering from the same shortage of type B providers. And I want to also add that they, you know, no matter where the quality piece is, the objective is to make sure that each of these households are at the absolute highest quality. So if there were a star rating placed on them, they would be at the highest level. So that's the ultimate goal. I asked 4C that if we were to enter into a contract, that we could go from 4 to 25 in a 2-year period, and I'd like to see that higher. But I wanted to give them a goal to shoot. And I also explained that I really need type B providers that are spread out through our entire community, so that we have people that have access to those types of providers.
What is a type B
Sure.
provider?
A type B provider is, it would just be like, for example, if I filled out an application and said I wanted to be a type B provider and watch children out of my home. So I would submit it to our agency, and there would be an initial inspection of the home. There's trainings that are required to go through, whether it's CPR, an array of different trainings and things that they have to do prior to getting their certification. Once they go through that entire process, background checks, all of the technicalities, then they get certified as a type B provider. So if I was certified, when we get applications in our agency from parents who qualify for publicly funded childcare, then I would be on the list as somebody they could choose from to place their children. So they have the choice to choose an in-home childcare, which is our type Bs, or to select a center.
Or type A.
Or
They
a
could
type
choose
A,
a
which
type
we
A.
don't currently have any type As. That might be another thing down the road.
So a type B childcare program is a licensed program in your home with up to 6 children. In many instances, these are families that are taking care of their own children, so they have infants and toddlers themselves, maybe preschoolers, and then they take on a couple of other children as a business. So the maximum number of kids would be 6.
Correct.
Type A childcare providers are larger in-home childcare programs where there's actually staff, and that's up to 12. So the facilities requirements, the licensing requirements are different. It looks much more like a center-based childcare program, but it operates in someone's home.
So this program operating in somebody's house, they are, prior to this program that you're working up,
Yes.
this is something that they knew about that's being done by the federal government? Is that right?
No,
Is the state government doing it? Who's doing this? Is this purely Warren County that's doing this?
no, so each county has, each of the 88 counties under Job and Family Services has a child care component or a child care unit, and they not only do the eligibility for child care assistance, but they also work with our in-home providers. So, if you went to Cincinnati, they've got a vast number of these type B home providers that they can choose from to place children. So this is a statewide program.
And who funds this program?
And not only subsidized children are in this. So our child care system is a private child care system. So they're not funded by anyone. The issue that Lauren is talking about is with respect to the subsidies or vouchers that go with kids that are the publicly funded component that is a federal-state partnership. So if you qualify for this child care voucher, you can take it to any provider that will accept publicly funded children. What the issue that we're trying to address in Warren County is, when I first came to the county, I remember having a conversation with Lauren where we were very concerned because we only had 11 of these type B child care providers that accepted publicly funded children. Prior to the pandemic, I think we were around 8 or so.
8, correct.
And now we're at 4. And so what this is providing the business supports for a private business to help them get up off the ground, to understand the business practice, to be able to get their doors open, be properly licensed. So it's, providing that business acumen. I mean, most of these families love kids. They just want to take care of kids. They don't come armed with the business acumen, so it's supporting that training. And the benefit to the taxpayer and to Lauren is that it's providing capacity for our low-income children, particularly infants and toddlers, where we just don't have any places that if Lauren has, or Ohio Means Jobs has a potential job for them, there is no place for them to put their children, even if they want to work. So we're utilizing one-time money with the expert, with 4C for Children as the child care resource and referral entity to build up child care infrastructure, which are private businesses then. So they can take private pay families, and many of them, most of them do that too. It's a balance, because our voucher is less than what the market rate is typically. And so it's not creating infrastructure that the government has to support in perpetuity. It's taking advantage of this opportunity, both in terms of one-time resources and a lot of women who are out of the workforce now because they have to take, they're finding difficulty finding, affordable childcare, that it's giving them this business training to be able to provide for their own family while they're helping other families provide for theirs. So it's strictly one-time money, and trying to go from 4 of these licensed providers to 25, which is more than double where we were 5 years ago when we were talking about what a problem it is. The other thing to keep in mind is this particular childcare environment is, in many cases, a preferred environment for young families with infants and toddlers. And so the way the economics are now in the childcare financing is you're finding a lot of infant rooms closing and toddler rooms condensing in the childcare, the center-based childcare. So we're seeing huge capacity challenges for infants and toddlers. So if you're a young mom that has an infant and toddler, you may qualify for the subsidy, you may have a job, but you have no way to be able to provide care for your child while you take that job. So this is the problem that Lauren's trying to solve, and she's doing it in a way that I think thoughtfully utilizes one-time money in a truly one-time way that doesn't upset the fact that our system is a private system. It is not a government-run system, it is a private system, but we're creating this capacity that both private pay families as well as voucher families can utilize.
Absolutely. That's it. Thank
Okay,
you.
well, look, I'm somewhat confused still. So the funding for this program is from the state and federal government?
Yes,
Well,
and,
hold on just a second.
oh, sure.
And the people that are providing this, if they are doing this service where they're providing this child care in their home, they don't have to qualify as if they were somebody providing a child for somebody else's home. They're going into this business saying, oh, I'd like to run this business, but I can also do it for my own children? In other words, I can get paid to
No.
care for my own children?
No,
Okay, I'm
no.
just wondering how that works.
There are times where they do have their own children. They're not being paid to watch their own children. They're being only compensated from the state, Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, for any of those publicly funded children. So any of the families that qualify for our publicly funded childcare, that voucher that is then utilized, they're then
Can an
paid through the
individual,
state.
because clearly what the free market does right now is, you know, mom number one that has little Susie, mom number two next door that has little Johnny, mom number one is staying home to take care of her, mom number two wants to go to work, and they work out a free market transaction where I'm giving you $200 a week cash to watch little Susie with little Johnny. That happens all the time.
That
You don't
happens all
need
the time.
You don't need a license to do that.
No,
You should, I mean,
You
theoretically
should. I mean-
but that happens all the time.
It
That's not
does.
It's
It
not
does.
against the law to do that or anything like that.
No.
So, but what we're talking about is we had this one-time chunk of money from the
Yes.
federal government.
Correct.
It wasn't from the state. This
Correct.
federal dollars, one of the aspects of those federal $46 million that we got was, let's do something for the working poor.
Yes.
The people that are trying to get into the workforce, but yet childcare is the biggest prohibition on getting them back into the workforce. So what you guys have come up with is, instead of setting up and assisting these centers that people would come to, whether it's private or what have you, it's let's take some of this money and go and recruit and train and encourage people to either get in this business or expand from taking one child, like they're
Right.
doing right now in just a cash situation, and wait, there's 4 other kids on your street.
Right.
Up to 6 kids now can be in here. As a matter of fact, some of them might be on this voucher program, and then you're gonna be eligible to get the public voucher
Yes.
and actually make the revenue from that.
Yes.
In addition, that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And the other key piece of type B providers that you don't see that much of in centers is non-traditional hours. So you've got folks that work maybe the night shift, and it's really tough to find childcare for your children when you work outside of the normal 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So that's another area we really want to target as we recruit, is those who would be willing to offer those non-traditional hours, because I think that could really help those, especially those who work in manufacturing or hospitality, they work overnight at a hotel, whatever the case may be.
So how do we, since there were more people doing this previously, and there are way fewer doing it now, what is the demand for this? Do we know?
It's high.
Well, how do we know what the demand is?
I can share with you lots of demand studies. This isn't, this, the
I'm
thing
not
about,
talking about a study. Do we actually have
Yes.
actual data of people that want the service and that we know about?
I don't have it with me, but I would be happy to talk with my childcare. I have 2 childcare caseworkers, I should say, who tell me constantly the challenges that their families are having finding care for their children. They may be accepted and authorized for publicly funded childcare, but they can't find a spot.
and talk to any childcare provider in Warren County. It's true in the state, but certainly it's also true in Warren County. They will tell you for the first time they have waiting lists because they've had to close classrooms because they can't provide the staffing in order to keep those classrooms open. So our capacity is being shrunk there, and because childcare doesn't operate in a true market, it's a broken market. The demand exceeds the supply, and there's only so much people can afford to pay for it, and the public subsidy is, less than what those pay in the private marketplace. So we know a couple of things. I mean, we just did a statewide survey in Ohio. 60% of women have said that this is an issue that has kept them to either reduce their hours that they work, or they have had to get out of the workforce altogether because they didn't have access to affordable childcare in their community. That's a big issue. The second issue is we know prior to the pandemic, women with children under the age of 5 made up 10% of the workforce. They now account for 25% of the people who've left the workforce. And they point to childcare as being one of the major reasons for having to do that. And so as we started down this path of how can we use these dollars in a way that doesn't put government in a position of having to maintain these investments over the long haul, but helps to create capacity that we needed prior to the pandemic, but that it's really been accelerated because of the pandemic. This was a strategy to say, gosh, we can more than double the capacity that we had prior to the pandemic, which was, we literally didn't have places. If you worked a weekend or you worked a swing shift or you worked third shift, there were no places people didn't take those jobs. They didn't take promotions. They didn't work extra hours. So that's, I would love to be able to do some deeper dive just in Warren County, but between JFS and other statewide surveying data, it's just we don't have the places for people to put their kids if we want them to work.
So let me back up for a minute. So those people that want a service like this or want a childcare service, they're going to, places that have that have standalone buildings and do it all day long. Typically, I would assume that would be a typical day, not an evening or a night time. But do some of those places do it after the normal workday or during nighttime too?
I know of only 2 centers. I believe there's one in Mason, and the other one may not do it anymore. I'd have to verify that. Like I said, I only am aware of one for certain that I believe offers any kind of an evening hours, but they do not offer overnight. So what they offer is an extended into the evening. I can't recall the time. It may be 11 o'clock that you have to pick up your child or somewhere in that, but it's not an overnight.
Okay, so now, next question is, and we also know now that of the centers that provide childcare service, they've all got waiting lists, they can't accommodate the demand?
Sadly, that is true. They have waiting lists because they've had to make the size of how many children can be in each room smaller. Obviously, that is related to COVID, but the second challenge that they face is a shortage of staff, which I will talk about as well. It's one of my other proposals. So with less staff and less ability to have as many children in a room, they don't have as many slots, which is creating a demand and a waiting list for
So do we know
spots.
what the waiting list number is?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number. I'd have to reach out to the different centers and find out.
So, but you have talked to the different centers that have told you that there's a waiting list?
Yes,
You
yes.
just don't know how big their waiting list
I
is?
don't know how big their
or
waiting
How long
list.
the wait is?
Correct, I don't.
Okay.
And
Well,
this
that
is something different than center-based childcare, for
Right.
which
No, I
she has,
understand that.
she has another strategy for that.
But I assume that part of the purpose of this was to deal with the fact that the centers are not able to accommodate the demand, so you're trying to create more of a supply
Correct.
for that demand.
A supply for publicly funded children.
I get that.
Many of the centers in Warren County don't take the public subsidy. And so we know with lower income workers, many of them work second shift, third shift, and over the weekend. And, centers aren't even if they were taking publicly subsidized children or the vouchers, which the vast majority of them in the county are not, they can't utilize their services because they're not open the hours that they need to have the care. Because the subsidy only equates to the actual hours that the parent is working and some very limited transportation time to and from work for the parent. So it's not just paying, a monthly fee. It is literally an hourly rate based on the literal numbers. of
And it's a
hours.
lot, the price point's a lot, I mean, you go to a kinder care or something like that, number one, it is hard to get into, and number two, the price point's a heck of a lot higher. I mean, that's a business, they've got staff, they've got overhead, versus, the model of neighborhood.
Right.
Someone down the street is watching my kids, how do you encourage that person to actually do this?
Right.
And engage in that activity?
And giving them the supports that this program would offer, this one-time investment, could ultimately, help us through years to come by building that capacity. And word gets out, I say 25, if we can do this and we have a good model, and there's the ability to recruit even more, then we've only built even more capacity, which is great. More people can get back to work without that barrier.
Right, because in the reason that I think we suggested this, a long time ago was that very conservative concept of getting people off of welfare back into work. And there's been so many, it's not just anecdotal, I mean, it's a fact that one of the primary reasons people try to get back into the workforce but don't is because of the cost of childcare.
Absolutely.
And then they just say, with all the other government programs that are out there, I make more money staying at home. With all the child tax credits and all the stuff that I get from the federal government or the state government, I actually lose money if I go to work. That's a fact.
That is a fact, yes.
So then, in our conservative nature, but some of those people actually, and some of them like that, but then a lot of those people, I would assume, actually want to go back into work, want to get ahead, and they literally can't do it because they just don't have that access to the child care. And so this is just a chance that we're taking of saying, can we help foster that free market activity of getting people engaged in that business in a community sense, especially for the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, which is exactly who we're trying to help get back into the workforce.
Correct. That's exactly, you couldn't have said it any better. So that's absolutely the goal of this, and if it was to be approved to get this one-time funding, and I've put the total that 4C put in their proposal, it's about $486,450 for 2 years to do all this recruitment and build this capacity. I obviously would come back with updates and show you the progress that we're making throughout the program so that you can feel confident that the investment that the board would make is actually building that capacity and doing what we intended to do.
And a lot of this was, again, these ARPA dollars, which we didn't like to begin with. We had, they're very limited in what we can spend it on, and correct Tiffany, we maxed out what we could spend on direct reimbursements to the county and things like that. We maxed all that out.
We are currently, if you recall, the framework that we provided to you, it had different categories. This was one of those items in that category, and we are reimbursing ourselves for,
You know, the sheriff's.
the sheriff's, yes.
Everything we can.
We are doing that.
We
are doing
maxed that out,
We are
right?
doing that. We continue to reimburse ourselves. I think we can do that through 2024 maybe, or,
Yeah, you have, the money itself has to be obligated by, Candace with the mic here. Outstanding.
But I think the point, Dave, that you're making is we budgeted in that plan to max out those resources for the time period that we could.
And this is all leftover money. We have to spend
That's
on
correct.
something that's on the
That's
approved
correct.
list.
Yeah.
There's no other, my point is, it's not like we can say, oh, we're gonna go build the, water plant with these dollars. We can't do that. They're very specific in what we're allowed to spend it on.
Well, actually, they're very specific in what you can do, and they just came out with the final rules that everybody's reviewing. But I think what we tried to do and put in that framework in front of you is try to have a list of projects that were cross-county, very broad, that dealt with items that we knew. So as an example is one of the things that we discussed at budget time was the fact that some of the ARPA dollars would be used to counterbalance what you had put on to for the water softening bills that you now are pulling off, because we can use water and sewer is called out in that. So we have buckets of that. We did buckets in childcare.
But my point is, all of those things that were a direct reimbursement or reduction in what the taxpayers were going to spend, we maxed all of those things back. I mean, there was a formula on reimbursing for the sheriff's
Yes.
deputies.
yeah, we had
did
something
all that.
allocated in that bucket, yes.
Yeah, we have reimbursed ourselves plus addition to the sheriff's. I mean, so.
But
we-
you really tried to do you really tried to look at broadly across the county and said, what are our needs? You know, our needs, the community's needs, and tried to address those different things. So yes,
So as an example, I think it's sometime shortly, Matt Schnipke will be back in front of you because you let out a proposal for broadband.
for broadband.
We have a set amount of money that we have in the framework put aside for broadband. If it comes to fruition, he'll come at you at some point asking for that to be rolled out. If it doesn't come to fruition, that money may be allocated elsewhere.
My point is, the $46 million had strings attached to it.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
could not just simply stick it into the treasury and
Absolutely.
say, we had to spend it on something. My point is, and I don't know that I'm communicating it clearly, we looked at every one of those formulas that we could reimburse the county on our expenses related to COVID and all, we maxed all that stuff out. I know we did.
Well, I think the actual final rule that just came out that Martin referenced did provide a caveat in regard to what they call revenue replacement, which is a direct revenue replacement to the counties versus using a formula, and they said you could use up to $10 million. So that is a new caveat we're trying to work through. Obviously, I think we had a revenue replacement based upon a formula of like $3.2 million.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
but our revenue went up.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in the original framework.
We were, yeah.
In the original framework, and I don't have it in front of me the exact dollar amount, but Tiff is correct. We did the original formula and revenue replacement based off a formula that was originally given in the interim rules. We reimbursed ourselves, or will reimburse ourselves, approximately $3.3 million. In addition to that, we looked at things inside the sheriff's office, or sheriffs and corrections. That's in addition to that. We did items like for healthcare expenses that we had relative to COVID that came through Tammy Whitaker and health benefits.
Testing.
Testing, that's reimbursed in there. So there are several different categories that, for, in air quotes, we reimbursed ourselves for things that were COVID related. With that number, there is an additional, 30-some million dollars, 40-some, whatever the number is, else that we could do out in the community. So we had buckets that were dealing with childcare here, broadband there, some other smaller ones that were in the community that was asked. So that's when we got a little bit, to answer your question, we have done everything that we could to make sure that Warren County, my words, was made whole as best as possible based off all the formulas that we had. And then we tried to dive into the community to see what other needs were out there that were called out, such as populations of childcare and things of that nature.
I just wanted to make sure that, at least from my standpoint, the number one thing with these dollars were reimbursing and getting back into the treasury what at a 46 million as much as possible to directly benefit the taxpayers. Period. Then on top of that, we since we couldn't do the whole 46 million, whether it was $1 or 46 million, clearly can't be 46 million, and clearly it was more than $1. There was some number in the middle there that we reimbursed ourselves. 10 million or 15 million or 20 million, whatever that number was, whatever, the water softening project, sheriff's reimbursement, I remember that one. There was quite a few things on that list, and you're saying there's a direct revenue replacement of $3.2 million. So all of those things totaled up, I would like to think, in my direction, would be that we max that out. Before we come up with creative ways to spend the remaining 20 million or whatever it is, I wanted to make sure every dollar that we could get back into the county coffers was directly for the benefit of the taxpayers.
I would say is the framework we put in front of you address that. We did that. We'll review anything that comes through the new final. But I would sit there and say is what we presented to you in that framework brought as much back to the coffers that we could legally, and then branched out to the needs that we had presented to us, or we thought of from the community's perspective. I think we did address that.
Are there new definitions that you just mentioned where we need to review that to see whether we can, access more of these funds to do reimbursement of our coffers, so to speak? In other words, have you reviewed the most recent regulations on this so that we've, done everything we could in light of those new requirements?
I think we're in the process with that. I mean, there's a lot of CCAO and different sort of
Right.
chatter that's going around.
Prosecutors looking at it.
Yeah, so, I mean,
When will you be done with that review, or finished, I'm sorry?
Have you ever seen the Federal Treasury's rules? No, it might take some time to work through it. I think for the majority of the rules, they stayed the same. They were consistent with the interim rules. The one new caveat, as I did mention, is they did provide an either-or method for determining revenue replacement. Previously, there was a calculation that was quite in depth. When we ran the calculation, it was roughly $3.2 million. Because they look at it over a period of 3 years, so you could go back and then it's an average. And as I said, it's
Well,
complicated.
I think we need to have a specific discussion on that, because again, and I'm not picking on broadband, but I know that's a big number. It was like $5 million or something.
Roughly, yeah.
And do we want to spend $5 million on broadband, which is, again, maybe I can be convinced that that's a good thing, or would I rather have that $5 million being returned in for some sort of expanded revenue replacement? That's an open question.
And I agree, but that was the purpose of the RFP that's currently out, is we don't know what we don't know. So that would give you, that RFP and the consultant would give you that ability to say, wait, like that's not an issue, it is an issue, it needs to be more than $5 million.
So Tiffany, are there expenses related to COVID, including down revenues for which we've not been able to make the county treasury whole? And what would that amount be?
Say that again?
Are there expenses related to COVID that the county has taken on for which we've not been able to reimburse ourselves through the federal, whether ARPA or CARES Act dollars? And are there revenues that were down that we weren't able to replace? And how much does that total?
No, I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Maybe Martin?
I can only think of one, and that is when we presented the framework, we worked with Tammy Whitaker in Health and Benefits to kind of understand what we had spent up to a moment in time. And I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think it was like 800 and some. I'd have to go back and look at the number. That's the only thing I can think of that might then push forward, because obviously COVID didn't just stop in that moment in time. That would be the only number that I can think of off the top of my head that may increase, that we would need to be reimbursed for.
You mean in terms of
Healthcare
testing
costs.
Healthcare
and-
expenses,
and-
testing.
Claims.
Claims that would have come back to
Right.
us because we would have paid for the testing supply, the testing of whatever,
So
so.
what I'm hearing you say is anything beyond when we approved the framework, any expenses that we incurred for paying claims on healthcare related to COVID would not have been reflected in that.
That's the only thing I can think of off the top
But that
of my
there's no
head.
revenues for which we didn't collect that hasn't been reimbursed. And there's no other expenses that you know of that the county has spent that hasn't been.
Off the top of my head, outside of the framework that we presented, I'm not thinking of any. If you recall, the framework included things like trying to assist the health department in finding a location to address, their testing in the parking lot out here.
Just
On
the
any
spacing
given day,
issues.
you'll see 3 or 4 cars and they're testing actually in the parking lot. That was on our framework. I'm trying to think,
Yeah,
we had the Convention and Visitors Bureau and
Yeah,
revenue replacement.
Because, what was called, there was several things obviously that were called out in the ARPA legislation relative to, populations, water and sewer negatively impact. Childcare was one of them, travel and tourism. So we had the buckets of what we kind of called as, infrastructure, revenue replacement, economic development. So that's what, to her point, we, on the travel and tourism, because that's significantly important to the county, we would work with the CVB on the sports complex, their revenue that was lost, partnering up with the city of Middletown on the town mall entertainment venue, sports entertainment to revitalize and transform what's been sitting there. We have the revenue replacement that we just discussed, the partnership that you have with the Educational Service Center and the testing and bringing folks back in that. So we have that. That was around $800 and some thousand dollars.
$850.
So the only thing that, to Tip's point, the only thing that I can think of that might still be somewhat ongoing is anything that we have from a testing
Well, why
perspective.
don't we just schedule another time to go over the framework to see where we stand, what it looks like, your current understanding of what it looks like? Let's just do that. But from regard to Lauren's stuff, clearly there's millions and millions of dollars of money that we have discretion on. And is this one of the things? So yeah, it's not, at least this initial, well, yeah, I guess there's some bigger numbers in here too. So, but at least we need to have the discussion of this in conjunction with the framework. Is that within what we initially budgeted or not, and making sure that the framework is still intact, and there's not the opportunity, we thought we could do revenue replacement of 3.2 million, and in reality, it's 13 million that we could have done. And that.
Yeah, it's a max of
I
10.
don't-
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
max of 10.
I just don't know, and so maybe that's something, but again, that's a different work session of how's the framework looking and what do we have versus what Lauren's talking about. If here's something that we gave her direction on inside of this framework of, here's a program to help get people off of welfare to work. How do we do that?
And I do think that this is an important, I know we have vacations coming up, and that was one of the reasons I wanted Lauren to bring this forward is, we're really trying to address this problem, and I'm hoping that the commissioners will see the value and maybe let her hit the second and third bullet in terms of within the framework, this is how we wanted to use the money, because I do think it's a pressing issue, and the longer it goes, I mean, we're just perpetuating the current problem.
How did people get recruited before this program that you've done? I mean, obviously, we had
They
these
didn't
people
get
doing it.
recruited.
I'm saying, oh, wait, I would say, what was it you said, Shannon?
They didn't get recruited.
So they recruited themselves?
Yeah.
Right, we've never had a traditional recruitment
Well, so
program.
apparently, and so how did people find out about the program?
Typically, it's word of mouth. You know, there was several years ago, we tried to do, send out flyers to different churches and different organizations to get the word out, and just didn't really get any kind of a true response from that, and maybe a few people.
And there wasn't really a program.
There
I
wasn't.
mean, this is providing people with the training and support and paperwork processing and teaching them how to know, how to look at a balance sheet and how to know if they're making a profit or not, and how to know how to upload all the documentation. Like, there was never, I mean, the
Nothing.
fact that we sent out flyers to encourage people to do this, we never had the ability to provide the supports to make them be successful businesses. A lot of people go into this business and then they leave because they couldn't figure out how to end in the black. And so this is a way to support the development of private business that tends to be run by lower income women in our community. It's supporting them to be business operators in a successful way, while at the same time providing a service to other low-income families to have a quality place that's safe and nurturing so that they can be able to remain connected to the workforce. I mean,
Okay.
that's,
I'm just trying to understand how it operates in the past when we weren't doing this. And now other counties, you alluded to Hamilton County, where I'm assuming that you were saying that they have a lot more providers.
Just by the nature of their population, they do have a lot more providers.
Okay. So I was gonna ask, do we know how other counties that have a lot more providers manage to get people to do this? Do they have programs like this?
You know, I do know in Franklin County that they did try to do some recruitment efforts. I am unsure. I believe I could be incorrect about this, whether they did it from their JFS department or if they contracted, like this program would be. But I think it was more of a media approach, kind of getting it out there in the media, as opposed to what this would be, which is a more of a supportive. It doesn't just kind of put it out there in a big way. It provides the actual support to get these
I mean,
these
this is
folks
something that
started.
we're designing ourselves. Like,
Yes.
we don't know what the success is going to be, but I can tell you, as a board member of CCAO, we are meeting in committees from small rural counties like Shelby County to large metropolitan counties like Franklin County or Hamilton County are grappling with this child care issue. There is no place in this state where this is not a challenge, and you have counties, Defiance County, Shelby County, small counties that are looking and experimenting with these ARPA dollars as a way to build infrastructure. And we're trying to build a collaboration among commissioners to be able to share best practices and learn from one another. And every county is approaching this differently. And as Lauren said, this is unique because it's uniquely designed to meet the specific needs in Warren County. There are things that our other colleagues around the state can learn from it, but they're designing programs to look differently. What is consistent is that they're all trying to figure this out. It is a huge problem that, when businesses are saying, we don't have workers, And parents are telling us, this is one of the reasons that I'm not able to get in the workforce. And our leadership in JFS is telling us, when they have parents they can connect to the workforce, they have no place to send them that's able to meet their needs for childcare.
Well, okay, I understand that. So is this program, I got two other lines of questions that I
Sure.
have. Is this program meant to give money to a particular entity to do this recruitment thing? Is that for this 4C for children? Is this where the money goes?
Correct.
Okay, who is 4C for children?
4C, how would you best,
4C is what's known as a child care resource and referral agency.
Who are they?
The state is divided into regions. They're an organization that is contracted to provide services to parents who are seeking childcare. So if you're looking for childcare, you would call them and they would help you with placements. They also do all of the training, so the trainings that are required for licensed childcare providers. They provide training and support to the providers. And so they look differently in different communities.
Is it public or private?
So it's really a private entity, a nonprofit entity.
Nonprofit.
They do look different in different areas of the state. So they are, some of them are, so for example, in the northwestern corner of the state, the YWCA there has the contract to do, with the state to do the child care resource and referral work. In our part of the state, so that's the Dayton and Cincinnati, both of those regions are in the 4C. 4C has that. They're a freestanding nonprofit organization, and they provide training and support as well as services to families to keep them connected. So they aren't for-profit entities. Their whole purpose is to support and train child care providers through licensing, through step up to quality
So
requirements.
this is what they do.
This is what they do.
So then, yeah, I mean, I would almost say, thinking outside the box, if we like this program, and I do, because again, it's not government's trying to take over this, government's trying to hold out a carrot and encourage
Right.
free market behavior, which is what I'm all about. And again, it's in the yeah, it's a lot of money, but is it, it's one-time money that we have available to us to hopefully try to address this need that exists right now. You go in and send letters to every Sunday school director or preschool director at every church and say, hey, you got a struggling mom that's really good with kids, that's trying to maybe make some extra money. I mean, those are our recruiters.
Yep.
Right there is you start targeting churches and things like that to try to say, hey, you're trying to help someone out. We've got something that, you tell us who that is, we'll talk to them.
Absolutely.
Where is 4C for children located?
Their office is in Norwood, and they also have an office, I think, in downtown Dayton. So they serve two regions.
Okay. And have they been doing things in Warren County previously?
Yes.
What have they done in Warren County previously?
They provide all of the training, and they are the contracted entity that if you have if you're a licensed childcare provider, there are your staff, that certain levels of staff need certain kinds of training. So they don't they don't contract with us. They provide the services to the providers
So a
directly.
center in Warren County that wants to set up or is already set up would separately contact these people for help. Is that
Yes.
right?
Correct, with trainings and those
do
needs.
people who do what this anticipates recruiting, do they go to these people currently too for help and training and with their business, or no?
They certainly could do that, like our current type
Well, I'm
B
just asking
providers.
whether they do it.
No, this doesn't exist. This
Yeah.
particular type of training doesn't exist. They are building out, they are creating this since what they do is training and they understand the workforce and all of the licensing. They are actually creating this for us and then hiring their own staff to be able to perform the task. So
That was
this
gonna
is
be
not
my-
the piece they do already.
Right.
Okay, that's my question.
Yes.
And so, and I was gonna, my second line of questions was gonna go on to what you just kind of touched on. But, so 4C for Children is a nonprofit entity that has a place in Norwood and a place in Dayton, and they currently will help centers with their childcare programming and things like that. That's what they do. And you guys contacted them to make this kind of proposal, right?
Correct, yes.
And they then said, okay, we like this idea, we see there's some opportunity here, and they gave you these numbers, and the 486 is kind of recapitulated on the last sheet here,
Right.
right?
I broke it down. I think the last sheet is more my own budget that I broke down.
Well, I'm just wondering,
Sure.
are those their numbers and how they break them down, or are they yours?
It is, they, in their proposal that is prior to that, they did break it down, and I just put it in the format more of an actual budget, so that if it was approved, I would have that starting point to move forward and track
Well,
expenses.
Were they the ones that gave you this breakdown, or did you just create it?
They really gave the breakdown within their own proposal.
Okay, so as I understand it, basically, their proposal to you in response to our request that they give us some ideas in this thing, which seems like a neat idea. But in any event, it's, if you look at each one of your items, it's really for paying people to do something, except, so in other words, you've got coaching, that's paying somebody to do that. Training and education, that's paying somebody to do that. Recruitment coaching, program coordinator, that's paying somebody to do that. That's paying their staff or somebody to do this. Essential startup training, that's paying somebody to do it. But then you get to the big amount of
The
money.
big number.
Which is capacity funding.
Yes.
Okay, and then I've looked through your document to figure out what that is.
Sure.
And it sounds like, and there's a sheet that says Part 2 recruitment startup training new program, okay, and it's got a capacity funding category.
Yes.
So I looked at that too.
Yes.
Okay? And so if I understand it, that is an estimate of about $10,000 per recruitee, okay? Is that right?
Yes.
And so they're estimating, and this apparently includes paying some people to do something because it includes the category of inspections. But then there seem to be hard costs. And so that's what I was kind of interested in. So you're actually, they're proposing that if somebody is being recruited, they're gonna tell them, you know, we're going to give you cribs and cots, we're gonna give you some furniture, we're gonna give you some safety equipment, we're gonna give you some educational materials, maybe some computer or printer. That's what they're offering to do for each of these families?
Correct. So when I touched base with them and they wanted to know what we thought we needed for the program, that was a component of it. It was building the capacity for those providers to have everything they could possibly need to open the door and provide safe childcare for the children. One of the challenges we've run into with, our still small 4 providers, but even the previous ones who have since left, is a lack of ability to either have good technology to run a business or not well-trained on technology. So it does include in this proposal that if one of our providers doesn't have sufficient technology, we would then provide them through this funding with a laptop, a printer, teach them how to use it, have them understand the spreadsheets and those types of things to run a business, as well as assist with providing them the much-needed safety equipment they need to pass inspections.
So I'm a recruitee, and I'll tell you what I would be, okay, so I like this idea. If I'm being recruited and they say, we're gonna give you all this equipment, we're gonna give you all this training, we're gonna teach you all of this, but you know what I'd like to know? I'd really like to know how much money I'm gonna make doing this, depending on how many kids I've got. So I wanna know, all right, you're gonna start me up with, you're gonna train me, you're gonna educate me, you're gonna give me this equipment. And then what I'd really like to know is, okay, if I do all this, how much money do I make depending upon the kids, and how much can I charge them? How much, where do I collect the money? Oh, well, they're getting a voucher or whatever, and that's gonna be that amount. So have they calculated, because I didn't see this here, how much people, I mean,
Yes. God bless you.
Bless you.
These are folks that know the business model, know the rates, know that's part of what they're doing. So a lot of times when you have folks going into this business, they know they get the voucher, they may know what the voucher is, but they have no understanding of what their costs are and what they're getting paid.
so that's my question,
And
what is it? What's the, how much money do you
Well,
people
it
gonna
just,
make?
it depends on the circumstances, but
Right.
that's the whole point of, it depends on if they take private pay kids
Right.
and subsidized kids, under what mix. You know, do they take part-time kids, do they take full-time kids?
Well, do we know the answers to those questions though, Shannon?
Yeah, I don't know the answers, but they know the answers. This is a real, it's like any other business. There is modeling that they do to say, here's how you make a profit. This is the mix that you need to make a profit. Under this model, this is, you know, it depends.
Right, and I feel confident with 4C that they would sit down with each of the recruited folks and go through that whole strategy.
I
Here's
mean,
how it would look.
and again, normally I don't like doing things like providing the equipment but there is a public need for this. I would, suggest that any one of these candidates that goes down, they do the training, they look like they want to do it, they're doing all the stuff, hey, we're ready to go, we're going live, you know, May 1st, all of a sudden, here's your laptop, here's your 3 cribs, here's your thing here, that there needs to be some sort of a contract.
Agreed.
That if they do this for 2 weeks, and you're not keeping the laptop, you're not
Right.
keeping the cribs, you're not
Right.
keeping these things, there needs to be a real contract there that we have the authority to come and remove and do. Is it gonna be trashed? Is it gonna be this? Is it gonna be a problem? Yes, but, at least it gives that, you know, if someone's trying to kind of halfway scam the system a little bit, it gives them that pause of, this isn't gonna be as easy as I thought, if they're just gonna hand me over $5,000 worth of stuff,
Right.
and I work for 2 weeks and that's it.
I agree with you, and so obviously, if this was to be approved and we went into an agreement with 4C, part of that agreement would outline that they would be required to have those folks sign an agreement, which I could work with 4C on what that would look like and what the actual requirement would be. Like, for example, you have to commit to 1 year or 2 years, or whatever the case may be, and if not, we have the right to take back the equipment and all of the things that we had provided.
Right.
I agree
That's a
completely.
legal question, you know, are we
Yes.
technically leasing them our equipment for $1 or something? And if they breach, you know, if they're no longer employed, or,
Right.
you know, doing it, then that lease terminates, it's our equipment to begin with, all that.
Absolutely. That would definitely be part of the agreement.
Well, again, it's a little bit of a Hail Mary, we don't know.
We don't know.
If it works, but I like the concept of, we're trying, number one, and number two, we are depending on the free market. You know, the Warren County is not setting up new childcare centers where people come to us, and I know, because I even thought of that, but you guys said that's not the way it really works. You want childcare that's 2 or 3 doors away from you, you want it in the neighborhood, that's the way in the real world it
Right.
works. And so you're trying to address that. I do see that system of, the recruiters, I think, are people that are involved with nurseries, or they know, you know, a friend of a friend, this person's the best mom in the world, she loves taking care of kids, and one of hers just aged out, or whatever it is,
Right.
you know, that, and you put in there, hey, interested in making an extra $1,000 this month? You know,
Right.
watching extra kids, you know, you're watching 3 kids or 4 kids, you know, you can make upwards of $1,000 this month just for watching kids.
Right.
You know, whatever that number is.
Right.
But I think I think it's worth a shot.
I think so. And we'll support, and this program supports that person who may want to get that extra money where we didn't have that before. So I just think, I really, in my heart and my gut, I think it's going to be successful. I really do. I think we're going to show that this type of a program can really do wonders for the capacity for childcare and offer our residents more options.
Is it possible for you to get to us some sort of pro forma of what a person could earn, depending upon how many children they take, what their mix is between private and voucher funding? Is it possible to get that? I'd like to see that, because I don't think you're gonna be able to recruit people unless you can show them that type of thing.
Show them what they could potentially make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll work on
I
that.
agree,
Yeah.
but that's,
That's up to the professionals.
yeah,
to
well, it's down the
figure
road,
that
hopefully,
out.
but I think it's a valid point of, are we going down this path, and it's like, no, actually, the economics don't work at all, you know, you're not gonna make money. You know, just having 4C tell us, yeah,
The
we've done these things.
economics are really tough. That's why this isn't a market. The economics are tough. This is a tough business.
Before I throw money at this, and I know it's not our money, but I consider all public money that I have control
Oh,
over to
yeah.
be something that we have to be good stewards of.
Absolutely.
I'd like to know that this is an economic model that works, and that people can make money. And because if it turns out that we're giving this entity 4C for, this 4C for children, basically money to pay for staff or current staff or whatever, and then we're trying to recruit people, but it turns out they can't really make any money doing this. No
Right,
matter how
I think
much
that's
training.
because that's a premise question of, hey, if you have 1 or 2 kids that you're taking on, and, technically you're actually gonna lose $200 a month by doing this. I think it's a prudent
Yeah, that's all I'm
view
saying.
of,
But
hey, they need to charge, $200 a week, or whatever that is, or they need to have 1 private and 1 voucher, or what have you, just to say, hey, because again, if it's, they come in and say, you know what, the economics are so tough, no one's actually gonna make any money doing this. Well, there's gonna have 2, 3, 4 kids in their house, and they're gonna be breaking even at best.
Right.
Oh,
Then
and
it's
they-
like,
Yeah, and oh, by the way, the reason why we had this, and now we have this, we have fewer, is because all those people discovered you can't make any money doing this. And so they're all getting out.
But
And
that's that's our
That's the
problem.
problem. Like, that's
Yeah,
what
but
we're.
that problem doesn't get solved by recruiting more people into the problem.
No, well, we are trying to, what 4C is saying there, and what we know from doing the modeling is that there is a way to make money off of this.
That's what I want you to
And
show.
that's what they're going to figure out. And I'm sure they're going to be able to provide that. But don't be deluded. This is creating a business that, people aren't getting rich out of it. What it's doing is taking advantage of their love of taking care of children and their own need to stay home with their own children
To make
to
some
money.
allow them to
Right,
be
so
able
to
to
supplement some income.
support their
And
families.
that's what I was talking about.
Right.
You've got 4, if I'm taking care of 4 or 5 kids this month to net $1,000, some people that's great. Some
Right, and
people that's
so
not.
remember, as we said, the voucher only goes for the hours that a parent is actually working. And the challenge is you're holding a slot for that parent because you can only have 6 kids. And let's say you have 2 children of your own, so you can take 4 kids. Depending on the work schedule of the families you're providing care for, it is varied and there's so much variability because if one family is only working 20 hours a week, that business is only getting paid for that 20 hours a week, even though they're having to hold open that slot the entire time.
Which goes into the economics of maybe
Yes.
you have to have 1 private pay person that you can count on to make any of this work. Let's know that up front, or is it 2, or is it 3,
Or understanding, like, so in the instance of like before and after care, you have a lot of businesses that say, okay, I've got kids who are school age and I'm gonna keep them for 2 hours before school and 4 hours after school, and then I can fill in the middle day with infants and toddlers. So there's that kind of juggling on who are they trying to recruit into their business as customers. So it's just, this is, an extremely complicated business, because unlike in the private market, whether I take my kids or not, whether my kids are sick or not, or quite frankly, whether I'm working or not, I'm paying a monthly rate to my center-based childcare provider. So they have stability for that slot. They're able to hold that slot open, and it doesn't matter if I'm there or not, my kid's there or not, because I'm paying for it. That is not the case with the subsidy program. They pay on hours. And then, you know, how do you figure out how many days does the state give you for sick days where you're going to get paid for a time when a child is sick? And you don't want a child coming to your child care program sick, because you don't want other kids to be out sick. How do they understand the regulatory umbrella there and to be able to make that economics work? This is the most complicated business for which there's very little training and support out there. And it's no wonder people, you know, aren't successful. Not to mention the fact that even if they're not on subsidy and they're private pay, there's only so much families can afford to pay. So this is really designed to help them understand all the variabilities, how they provide that stable funding stream. And as they constantly have kids aging out, so if they take infants and toddlers and then suddenly those kids are going to school and their parents no longer need their services, how do they continue to operate in that same business model? So it's not like in the private market, because the state you have to have work, and you only get paid for those working hours. And with low income or hourly workers, that is very variable.
Well, I would say that, again, we're not adopting this program right this second. Is there a desire to move forward with exploring it and maybe having more due diligence with 4C and things like that? From my perspective, I would say yes, although, Shannon, based on your last comments, my initial gut reaction almost went back to what my initial gut was. We need to open break-even childcare centers. You know, the Warren County has a facility in Franklin or in South Lebanon or whatever, where it's almost, you know, the building, and we've got a staff of 3 or 4 people in there, and we know we're not going to make money off of it, and we know all of those problems, and it's what government does, but it's almost a lost leader, because we will save money, taxpayers will save money by getting those people off of welfare over time. That just popped into my head.
I
Maybe I'm
would
dead
never
wrong,
want to
but-
be in the childcare business. It's the average wage for our childcare providers in Ohio. This is whether they're private pay, public pay. It's $10.67 an hour. So which was hard enough before the environment we're in now. So, you know, pushing up, there's no childcare providers that are paying $15, $16, $17 an hour. There's no workers in this space. We're losing in the childcare world. We're losing workers. They're trained professionals. They're leaving the profession altogether, and they're going to work at Amazon or
100%
Target.
for 18 or 20 bucks an hour.
And they're never
Pick, pack,
going
and
to come
boxes.
back. You know, many of these childcare professionals, they don't make any benefits either. Very few of them have access to health benefits. Many of them are on the system themselves. So the reason why being in the business of childcare is something that while I think I understand the problem you're trying to solve, it is so complicated to be able to break even, because the wages are so unbelievably low. And, you know, it's in the public space, it's even more profound. You know, a lot of times you have childcare providers who come in and get trained and so forth because they can get childcare subsidy for their own children in the facility in which they're working. And so they're on the system themselves. It's really, this is not an easy problem to solve, and this in and of itself isn't a panacea, but a $500,000 investment to start to understand, is there a way that we can build real capacity in this county to start meeting the needs of these families who are wanting to work, who, need to have this in order to do so? I think it's a really low risk, small investment on something where Lauren's thought a lot about this and has worked with the professionals to put something through to see if a $500,000 makes a difference.
Again, I agree. It's just that it's just thinking in the back of my mind, who enters into things that you don't make money that's in the public's good in public parks. We don't make money on public, but it's in the public's interest, that do,
Public schools, yes, there's a lot of us in this work that would agree with you, that having a system that recognizes the public purpose and builds that out makes sense. I'm not sure one-off, in fact, I'm fairly confident that a one-off is
But
fraught.
I say that coupled with the thought that the federal government screws up everything that they touch, and, all of these preschool programs or what have you, a lot of them have not been effective. So that's why I was just kind of thinking, hey, the Warren County way of, hey, we've got 2 or 3 open Krogers, or vacant, big box retailers that were now vacant. Hey, you open up a daycare and you have 5 employees in there, and we bring in some money, it costs us some money, but there's, 100 families are now out in the workforce, that's.
As long as they all live in the same community, right? I mean, the beauty about family childcare is that that barrier to entry into a market is relatively low beyond that real barrier for individuals to start their business. It's not like, you build up a facility. If I live in Franklin and you build up a facility in Franklin, that's convenient. But if I live in South Lebanon and you build up a facility in Franklin, I'm not, I can't take my kid to Franklin. So these smaller, more agile childcare programs, can be where the parents need them to be.
Okay, so, I again am open to this,
Okay.
but I would like to see some sort of pro forma that shows under what circumstances does a person make money, or it's advantageous. I mean, is it only advantageous to the person who's already at home deciding they're gonna care for their own children and they wanna supplement their income? Or is it advantageous for a person who has no children in their home and they wanna go and supplement their income because maybe their husband, or maybe they're single, I don't know.
Sure.
I'd like to see how this actually works. I agree with Commissioner Young that I'd like to see some solution to this problem. I never like the idea of having the public go into competition with private enterprise that's already providing the service here. Any event, but I'd like to see that this thing could be economically advantageous to someone, which after all is what you're trying
To do.
to recruit them. You're trying to show them how to run a business successfully, which I assume means that they're not gonna be in the red.
Right.
So I'd like to see that, and I
Okay.
assume based on looking at your package.
Yes.
That you're not simply talking about this, there's a couple of other
Oh, there's a
things in
couple
here.
other.
Yeah, there's 2 other bullets
There-
to her,
Yeah, one
increasing
of
the
which-
eligibility and then a supplement for the actual
Yeah,
childcare center employees.
right.
And trying to
so do you
not
wanna
only
get onto
recruit.
those?
I'll get onto those, and how about we'll say, I'll come back with like a business model example, and I'll work with our partners at 4C to try to bring back something that I think could help show. how someone is able to make money. And I even have a relationship with one of our type Bs, which I will reach out to her as well and ask for her to provide
And I
some
would think that the
information.
people that currently do it, if that's what you're talking
Yes.
about, could say, hey, I do make money, here's how
Absolutely.
I do it, and
Yep.
here's my
Yep.
cost structure.
I
and
will.
Here's my own pro forma of what I'm doing in
Right.
terms of the people that I'm caring for, how long I've been doing it.
Sure. I'll bring it
Because
back.
if it's only advantageous for somebody that actually is taking care of their own children for a couple of years, well, that means that, they're gonna be going out of business right away. Okay,
I'll bring back all of that so that I can help you feel more comfortable and confident in that. Okay, the second project. So, just to kind of explain, so our publicly funded childcare program, if I was to apply today, I have to be earning, my household, less than 142% of the federal poverty level, very low. So there's a lot of folks that are not eligible, so they're not able to get that kind of assistance through our programs. However, they are making such a small wage, and sometimes we see people who are only as shy of $50 over what the limit is, but, realistically, we know they're still truly struggling. So the expanded childcare eligibility project, I've tried to condense it as much as possible. Our purpose is to try to assist those who are over the threshold for our publicly funded childcare program and assist them with the cost of childcare for a period of no more than 1 year is what I have proposed. And I mirrored this off of the existing publicly funded childcare program. However, the eligibility would be an income level of 143% of poverty and no more than 175% of poverty, which I included a chart so that you could see based on the household what those income levels look like. So we would then capture those who are still very much considered low income but are not able to benefit from our current program.
So this is an ongoing program, or this is the cost for 1 year?
So this, I did it for 1 year. And now, mind you, this is a hard one to really estimate the true cost. I have no idea how many children we would be serving under this program. It's a true and total guess at this point. At the end of your packet, not the very last page, but the next to the last, I did do a kind of a rough estimate. It's a challenge. Whatever number, if we were able to do this, if it wasn't at the 5.8 million, we would work with whatever number we had to work with to assist as many families as we could with whatever resources we have. I said, I just tentatively wrote for a 1 year timeframe and with the idea that could then hopefully stabilize the family and get them in a position where they can then independently pay for their childcare services. But it ensures that they have one less barrier to getting back into the workforce. And there's great jobs out there that they could pursue and hopefully then make more money as time goes on. And I put in the same qualifying activities that our current program has for publicly funded. It's all based on, paid employment, if they are in education, and proof of full or part-time. And you can see those 4 bullets.
so is the only thing you're doing so this is a subsidy that we would be directly providing to low-income households or families for them to pay for childcare?
So the way I would like to structure it, we actually already have a great relationship with many of the child care providers in Warren County centers in particular. And what we do is if someone is approved, let's say example for this program, the child care provider, say KinderCare, would send us an invoice. Some of them like to bill us weekly, every 2 weeks, monthly, whatever they prefer. And then we would then pay the center directly for the care of the children.
Okay, so do we currently do something like this?
We do. So I had talked a little bit about the kinship caregiver program, the 88,000 that we've spent so far through through our other program. It's ultimately the exact same program. Right, what we do is kinship, you will say grandma, or grandpa, or aunt and uncle apply. And they set up for the children to get into a childcare facility. We really already have most of them set up as vendors. And we work with them, and they bill us for the kids, the kinship kids. So it's the same exact program that we are already doing. So the logistics are already in place, which is nice. It would just be expanding it beyond what we are doing with kinship, but now doing it with a different population, not just grandparents and aunts and uncles and those folks. It would be those individuals or families that are above publicly funded childcare, but still are in great need.
So right now, our program is based upon state and federal programming that is in existence.
That is, yes,
So all you're doing is taking the same state and federal program and changing the eligibility requirements. Is that
correct.
right?
Yes,
And
expanding
so-
it
and you're
higher.
expanding them, and if we do that,
Mm-hmm.
how do we ever get off of that?
Well, this is, you bring up a great point. This is obviously not something that would be able to be sustainable, and anyone who participated in that would have to understand that, similar to how it is with our emergency rental assistance program. It's not a forever. You have to make a plan. You have to figure out what you're going to do moving forward. So this would truly just be an opportunity to provide, whether it's a 1 year, 2 year, we could expand it longer and serve less kids. There's many options, or we can do it for a year and serve more kids, however it wanted to be structured. But each participant would have to understand that this is a temporary expansion that we're offering. There are some, we may be able to look at some options down the road and put something in our PRC plan, which we do not currently have, that could assist with some childcare costs, that could help a select few, not this same population, because, well, I guess it could really help the same, because you've got to have children and you've got to be at or below 200%.
How do you have a household of one with a child?
Really don't even look at that. I just put the chart in there. You don't.
Give it-
That's not a number you want to look at, yes.
Okay, so how do you know that this number is real?
I don't.
Because once you open this up with an eligibility
Right.
criteria, anybody who meets that criteria will qualify for the benefit. And you may find out that there's a whole lot more people out there that want to do this, and this may cost a whole lot more money. It might cost less, but it could cost a whole lot more.
It could, and just like any program, we can only help as much as we're funded to help, and that's true of all of our
Well, then how do you
programs.
cut the people off? Do you say, oh, I'm sorry, we only budgeted this amount for this, and even though you qualify, you don't get it? Is
So
that
the
what
way
you're
I would,
proposing?
the way I would approach it is, let's say I got X amount of dollars, and for each family that we would approve, we would know what the typical monthly cost, because we work with the providers, for each child. So, like other programs, I have a whole spreadsheet calculation. We would be doing projections based on who we approve, what that ultimate cost would be, constantly keeping track of where we are in our approvals, and for, let's say, we estimate it's gonna be for the full year. That's what we would base it on. We would be consistently looking at what we've approved, because it's not just a one approval, it's a 1 year, so there's a sum of money tied to each of those children. So that's how I would track it, and as we would approach the top, or where we could no longer take additional applicants, the program would close, and we would then just utilize whatever funds.
Is that how the current federal and state programs work?
No.
Do they have a cap on it?
No, they do not, and
Does that create legal problems if we do cap it? That we all of a sudden say, sorry, you qualify for this, but because you didn't get here in time, or because we've reached our cap, And does that create equal protection problems with people? Because I can see how, the federal and state government have a lot more resources than we do, and of course, they're funding this current program, not us.
Right, correct.
So we're just kind of a pass-through entity.
Pass through.
But when we change the eligibility standards, this is us.
It is,
But that creates a problem now, doesn't it? Because now, we're not merely spending the state and federal money, we're spending our money. And if you cap that, I'm not sure that there aren't some legal problems with this.
I think, so with other programs, what I've done traditionally in the past is when I write any program, it's always indicates that it's only available as long as funding is available. And in any application, which there would have to be applications, that is
Well,
clearly noted.
This is something that you need to look into.
Okay.
You need to look into this question because now we're gonna be taking on an obligation that is maybe funded by the federal and state dollars, but it may increase beyond it. And then once we've gone beyond it, and if we stop it, we need to know whether that's economic, or not economic, but whether that's
Legally an issue.
viable.
My initial gut is, this is too much.
Too much.
It sounds great, and the numbers, unfortunately, a family of four making $46,000 is not a wealthy family. I get it. But I'd rather see it a little bit more sustainable.
Okay.
To where even if we spent $6 million on this, that was ARPA dollars, that it's spread out over a 3-year period, which
Okay.
actually gives someone, where we're targeting maybe $2 million a year, where maybe that's going from 143% to 150%.
Okay.
Where there is some increase in it, it's gonna cost more money, but yet that's spread out over a more sustainable period of time. Because we know, and I'm sure you're guesstimating based on the number of people that are actually in the program now.
Right.
And how many people out of our residents are actually gonna be in that band of being in here. It's not thousands of more kids or something. We know it's some
Right.
more kids. You're just kind of guessing based on it. But yeah, I don't like the concept of it's here for today and then
Gone tomorrow.
it's gone tomorrow.
But isn't this through 2026? Isn't that the total spend through 2026?
Yes, the funding is there till 20, for the ARPA
Is
dollars?
this an annual
This is
spend, or this is
ARPA.
the
No,
program
this is the entire program,
This is
correct?
what I estimated for the entire program.
Which would be obligated by 2024, but spent out through 2026, which essentially takes it through
Meaning-
2026.
Oh, when you said it was a one-year program,
Well,
I was thinking,
at the time, when you try to think through a program, you're trying to determine how long is someone going to be eligible. Perhaps what we could do, because I firmly believe that we should be recertifying. If I approve somebody today, I don't want to give them the benefits for 3 years and not know what may have changed in their status. So maybe what we could say is, after 1 year, like we do with our other benefit programs, there's a recertification process that we then determine if you're still eligible
Well,
for
don't
this
you have to
program.
recertify anyway on childcare?
We
when
do.
Publicly
Yeah.
funded? Why would it be
Exactly.
any different?
So it would move that.
Even though the initial eligibility is less than 142%, if you're a family that had been eligible, remained eligible, and you got a raise, and that put you to 160%, then, you continue to be in the program. But no one who's working at 100% of federal poverty or more is not contributing to this. There is a sliding scale, and a sliding scale would still apply in this instance, following off what JFS already does up to 300%. So these families are paying co-pays that as their income rises, the amount of their co-pay is greater. That portion of their
income
childcare
goes
pay.
up, benefit goes down.
Yes,
Correct.
and so it would be the same, so it's an attempt to smooth out that, and we don't want to discourage people from taking promotions or working additional hours. So it's really a way to, when you keep that bump really narrow, so like from 143 to 150, that's a really narrow area to have that smoothing effect. So I would just suggest understanding if the idea here is to get people into the workforce, to stabilize the families, and to give them some trajectory, both in time, but also in income creep, so that they're able to smoothly get into self-sufficiency, which is ultimately what we're trying to do, is move families into self-sufficiency.
Correct.
I kind of view childcare as that piece that, you know, this is a piece that, while we're subsidizing things, it's helping people who are trying to help themselves by work and getting back in the workforce. And, you know, that's just the way I've always kind of viewed childcare.
Yeah, which I agree,
Simple.
fundamentally, I agree.
Oh, sure.
I was just concerned, Commissioner Grossman went right down that path immediately, you know, just a 12-month program.
Sure.
You know, here, the eligibility
Yeah.
goes up a lot, and you're great for 12 months. That really doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I think this
It
is
can be
over the whole.
We can do the whole 3 years,
but,
right?
But was your intent for this to only be 1 year?
I wasn't, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't sure when I
Go
wrote
back and
this.
look at your spreadsheet of, is this for an annual $5.8 million, or that's cumulative
Yeah.
over, you know, almost a 4-year program?
Right.
If it's 2022
True,
and it ends in 2026.
Yes.
Right.
You know, just come back, I don't think we're opposed to the concept of
Okay.
increasing that percent of federal poverty
Okay.
level. You know, because again, yeah, we are trying to get people
Mm-hmm.
in the workforce. That's what we're trying to do.
What I would ask, and I'll go back and do that, is that if I could leave the starting at 143% of federal poverty and maybe go lower than 175%. And the reason I ask that is because so often we have those individuals who are denied our publicly funded childcare because they're just slightly over, and a program like this would
But
capture
what are
them.
we now?
So right now, the cap is 142% on initial application for
Yes.
publicly funded. So
Yeah,
I
we're
want to
not
make
talking
sure.
about going
Okay,
down.
good.
Yeah, no.
Make sure. So I will come back with a more strategic plan over a 3 to 4 year period and be able to show you exactly what that would look like.
And get some legal advice from Bruce or
Right.
whoever with regard to how you deal with the initial questions I asked.
Okay, I will. I'll reach out to probably Adam and see if he can give me some guidance on that, so I have that to come back to.
Then your final,
My
project three.
final. There's not a lot to it, but Commissioner Jones and I were talking about wage supplementation. We both, I know she has spoken to it previously. The big problem, and you know, in childcare is that truly they're making $10 an hour. And they're losing people left and right, which is closing rooms, and it's a challenge with capacity. So this, and again, the ask is an unknown, because I can come back to you. I'd need to gather very specific data from each childcare center on how many staff members they have. But I developed a quarter-based incentive, or we call it a wage supplementation. So it's based on the number of years that employee that's there at that childcare center has been there. And each quarter, the childcare centers would provide to me a list of those employees and which category they would fall into, and then we would provide these specific dollar amounts based on their tenure each quarter as a way to hopefully incentivize childcare workers to stay in the business and continue to do the great work they do in taking care of our children.
And the benefit goes to the provider, and
It
the
does.
provider then passes through the wage supplement to their employee.
To the employee.
And is there any contemplation around star rating?
I hadn't, but I can.
Yeah, I of course understand the issue of the workforce here. I think tenure may be important. I'm not sure. it is or it isn't. I can't imagine the tenure is really that much. I think they're not gonna see much
They're in and out.
variation. And I would like to, you know, what we really want to preserve is our trained workforce. So
Okay.
the stars equate to training. And so the more training they have, I think is, you know, that we want to preserve that.
Okay.
That's my point of view anyway.
I think that, absolutely. I mean, this can be reconfigured to be based on the star rating of the center as opposed to a tenure. I suppose my big question is this something that, you know, obviously I can come back with more. I don't have a lot at this moment, but I wanted to at least put it out there as a possible project of the 3 that I have for, as it relates to childcare, to see if this is something you'd like me to move forward with and bring back.
Personally, I mean, I appreciate the idea. Personally, I have to think about that one a little bit more because I just think that's so far outside the norm of government subsidizing a private person's income. That's a bit of a stretch for me.
Okay.
I totally understand what that
Yeah.
point of view. I mean, this is a tough one, and it's, you know, how do you, when the market is broken and you can't increase the cost for the service, how do you continue to provide employees to be able to do it? I mean, this is, I totally get your point of view here, and I share it to a large degree. I just realize that, you know, we have trained workforce that we've invested in.
Yeah, I think in Warren County, as I just did a quick Indeed search, I mean, it looks like we might be a little bit higher, you know, Jelly Bean Junction, 12 to 15, 3 Cs, $15 an hour and up, 10 to 18 at the Goddard, $12 and above, 12 to 17 early childhood position, you know, so 1 and 2 kitty care, $15 an hour is their minimum. So, I mean, there are, hopefully it's, yeah, because I think the free market is telling those people, you can't pay $10 and expect
an
anybody to show up to work.
Yeah, but there is, so at the $17 rate, those are probably people with bachelor's degrees. And at the $12 rate are probably people with CDAs, the certification. And so the wage delta is so dramatic between your bachelor degree, and of course, most folks that are in a childcare program don't have bachelor degrees. So there's like 1 bachelor degree, a couple associate's degrees, and then you have these trained folks through CDAs. Those bachelor and associate degrees, especially with the bachelor's degrees, where they're competing with the public school system or private school system, are paying much more for early childhood teachers than private childcare. And so it's misleading because it's that $17 an hour is not going to, you know, a recent high school graduate.
And as we think through this, as you say, broken system, I think that's something that society needs to think about, of what are the expectations for this childcare. That, you know, for my 4-year-old, it's great that I've got someone with a bachelor's in there that's well-trained and knows what to do, but maybe that's not a realistic expectation anymore. Maybe it is. I don't want to use the word warehousing, but hey, the kids come in, they're watching movies all day, they're coloring, someone's there watching them, keeping them safe, but they're not learning anything. I mean, because, you know, no one's really equipped to teach them, but that's not what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
It's
but
just someone watching them.
We can certainly talk about that issue, and there's lots and lots of research around that, so we can talk about that. We can also talk about the behaviors of parents and where they're willing to put their kids. But setting that issue aside, it's not every classroom has a bachelor's degree in it. In most instances, there may be 1 bachelor degree professional in there who is supporting the 6-week CDA staff within all the classrooms. So it's not like a kindergarten classroom where every teacher has a bachelor's degree. These are only in a small percentage of the childcare workforce. My point is that $17 an hour isn't, those folks have more credentialing than those who are making $12 an hour, who have a high school degree and a child development credential.
Fair enough.
How about when I come back with the other suggestions and requests, I'll do a little more work on this. I'll bring it back, and if it gets a green light, that's great. If not, you'll at least have more. I'll provide more information on my next. Okay, so I know I've taken up so much of your time. The last thing I want to talk about, why I am in front of you, is emergency rental assistance. I'm going to run through real quick. So far, we launched in April of 2021. Year-to-date, we have paid 310 households. We have dispersed $2,253,386. And we have currently about $75,000 worth of assistance that's pending. And we have received 727 applications. We are approaching a year on this program. It's been a challenge, to say the least, but I think we've done a very good job, all things considered, and we've helped people avoid eviction. We've made landlords whole on arrearages that were owed. And as we reach the year point, I'm bringing to you my thoughts on this program. I personally think it may be time for it to come to an end, and the reason I'm saying that is I'm starting to feel that its purpose has already been accomplished. The purpose was to get those who were truly affected by when the government shut down, when everything shut down. That was when the impact was at its greatest. And we've been able to help those tenants and landlords over the past year to overcome where they got behind and avoid eviction. Now, what I feel I see is a concern, and you'll probably be like, wow, is Lauren saying this, that we're now enabling people not to move forward. You know, they consistently find ways to prove that somehow COVID is still impacting them, and the way the federal regulations are written, it's pretty loose. And I just have concerns that I just can't fathom this program going till 2024, which the funding allows it to go to 2024. For me, I can see it ending. And you'd be hard-pressed to hear me say that about too many assistance programs, because I'm all about helping our community, but I think this one has served its purpose. It is time-consuming and...
And again, I think you're preaching to the choir. There was a time for these things when the economy shut down.
Yes.
We're forcing people not to work. What do I do? Fair enough, I get it.
Absolutely.
But now the more government, and again, I've been saying this forever, but now we're all seeing it. Why do you think we're seeing so much inflationary pressure? We're all talking about wage inflation right now. We're seeing everything go up in price so much. Mm-hmm. What has changed over the last however many years? Government spending. It's the only variable that's gone goo-goo. With this influx of federal dollars and showing and just shoveling into people's pockets, you don't have to work. You don't have to do this. So then people had their savings, and now they've seen the stock market go up 15% a year on average for the last 10 years or whatever, and they're like, wait, I feel rich. Maybe I'm just not going to work, or maybe I'm going to go drive Uber part-time and be a 1099 employee. I'm not going back into the workforce because I can make a few $100 a week, and that's all I really need because I've got my savings over there. And people are just left the job market in masses because there's been so much ability. Part of our economy is this failure system that it turns over people that have extended that you do this, there's bankruptcy laws or what have you. We saw that in 2008 and 9. The economy bounced back. It's this progression. Was it rough? Absolutely. But that is part of this cycle. And right now, just assisting people that are not able to stay in their houses when there are job opportunities, as we all know, literally everywhere. That's been thoroughly discussed and proven.
Right.
Yeah, I've got no problem ending it.
Yeah, I'd love to shift from this program to the potential programs I just talked about as it relates to childcare. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is run it until the end of April, emergency assistance, and stop taking applications as of April 1st, which would be basically 1 year from when we launched, and then allow that month's time for us to finish those applications that are still in process. But I would then blast notifications so that people know that the program is due to end on a certain date. And then as it relates to the funding, there's a couple different options. Either it could be returned to the US Treasury, or I do know that, and this, I'm not sure how comfortable the county would be, but I know that Warren County Community Services is doing an identical program with other funds that they received. There is always the potential to contract, or however it would work, giving them some funds to sustain their program. Because there still will be an emergency rental assistance program as long as Warren County Community Services is offering theirs, even if we end ours.
Lauren, do you have families who are just now applying, meaning they just now are experiencing the hardship that, you know, I'm hearing you say there are people who've been on for a long period of time, and it's time for them to come off.
Right.
But I want to have an understanding, especially with low-income workers who may not have things like sick time. Do we see them coming into the system so that they haven't been on the system, but now circumstances have resulted that they need some temporary assistance?
There are a few, but there's not many. I check every new application that comes in, and I've only seen 3 that I can think of off the top of my head that the names are not new, or they are new, I mean. They're new to the system. And in each of those examples, they did get COVID. They had to be off of work for a period of time, so they applied.
And is there a way to, like, I agree with Dave, like, and I appreciate the fact that you've come here today saying this program has run its course, it's done what it's needed to do, and it's time to shut that down. I totally appreciate that. But what I don't want to do is, even if it's a handful of families that found themselves with COVID off work for a couple of weeks, they're not getting paid for those weeks, they're not able to make their rent payment for a month.
Right.
You know, we don't want to make matters worse for those families.
Correct.
And where they're ultimately get behind.
Right.
And so my question is, if it's only a couple of families, is there a way to really target then
Yes.
those couple of families?
Absolutely.
Well, PRC
PRC, with
would
our-
then pick that up
with our-
based upon what you did.
Yes.
But
That's
I guess
correct.
my
Correct.
question really is do your estimations around PRC contemplate the sort of increase potentially that we might get seasonally, for example? So if there are dollars that we need to put in there, I guess is what I'm saying is, have you thought about that?
I do feel that, you know, I alluded to the fact that I got about 163, and it might be 168. I'll have to go back and look at the actual allocation for COVID PRC response from the state, from JFS. We would utilize that. We could also utilize our TANF funding, and I am known for asking for others' TANF funding that goes unspent that we could then draw down and use. So I personally feel confident that I have enough funding abilities to meet that need, that gap of people that may still
And so
need
you're
some
not
help.
suggesting that we no longer meet those needs of
Correct.
families? You're just suggesting that you're able to do that through the modified TANF plan?
Yes.
And that makes sense. I appreciate that.
I really do feel that, that no one would still be left to struggle. We would be there to help them and support them, as would Warren County Community Services.
And we're giving them, 2 months' notice, 3 months' notice to,
Yeah.
to the ones who are even,
Right, and I would,
so that they're prepared.
yeah, and I would send out notification. I pretty much feel like I know every landlord now in Warren County. So I would make sure that they're all aware and notify everyone that the program, the last date to submit an application would be March 31st, which would be my hope. If, yep. So,
Makes sense.
Is that acceptable direction from the board? Or provide, okay.
good.
All right.
Then I can focus on childcare when I come back to you with even more information. I know I've taken up a ton of your time, and I really
That's
appreciate,
important. Well, I
I
appreciate the work
appreciate it.
Commissioner Jones and you have done on trying to come up with something outside of the box. So
Sure.
we said to do that a while ago, and you guys have certainly done that. And so, again, what's the goal? Getting people to work.
That's it. So I will quickly work on all of the suggestions and requests and get on your agenda so I can come back and hopefully then get your blessing on at least a few of these programs, if not all of them.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, well, Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Young, is there anything else today that you'd like?
I think
to
Martin's
bring up?
got something.
And I have,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
you can come up there, but, so Laura kind of mentioned it earlier. We received an email from Claremont County Commissioner Painter in regard to the One Ohio opioid settlement that we are participating in. As part of that settlement, the structure for how the funds are going to work, the state set up a foundation, they have a board. Then our region, which we're Region 14, comprised of Butler, Clark, Claremont, Clinton, Greene, Madison, and obviously us, have an additional board that will be provided resources. Commissioner Painter's asking which county commissioner would like to serve as our representative on our regional board. So that is something.
What's the function of this board?
It's actually, so the pot of money that's going to be coming from so we're going to get a direct allocation, okay? The state gets an allocation for the foundation board to, what's the word I'm looking at?
Distribute.
To distribute and/or come up with a plan of how they're going to address some of these opioid needs. But in part of that framework is the regions actually have a board. So we're in Region 14, so there's 2 different boards. There's 3 different boards. Our board, state board, region board. That's going to help facilitate the expending of this pot of money that has to do with the opioid settlement. So they're asking for a representative of a commissioner on that board to help guide the direction of these, 6 of our 7 counties.
I would be interested in doing it, but I'll happily step aside if there are others who.
No, I think then, Commissioner Jones, you are
100%.
All right.
selected to serve in that function. And we let you sally forth in our interest.
Very good. We will let Commissioner Painter know that Commissioner Jones will be our representative.
Is there anything else? for you?
Martin has 2 items, I believe.
Yeah, I've got 2 items, hopefully go hit quick here. One is I'm filling in for Tammy. She's out today, but there has been a request that has come through. It was submitted to UHC, and it is not a part of our coverage, and so naturally it is rejected. I'm going to try to obviously speak very broad to make sure that I'm not violating anything, but we have an individual that is a young individual who is failing to thrive. This has been before the board before different scenario and the doctor is requesting that they be on a special formula that's about $200 a month. And Tammy expects this to be about a year or so the cost wouldn't be that great, but in hoping that Tammy would get your support in order to tell UHC that this should be covered in the hopes that this would deter any other future issues in the future.
This baby has been diagnosed with failure to thrive.
Yes, but when it is submitted to UHC, it's not initial covered, and historically, you like us to bring these individual ones prior to you.
Which this has been one in the past that we have allowed that exemption. It's subject to deductible and co-insurance.
Or we could pay pay for higher cost
That's
hospital
correct.
admissions.
That's correct.
Because
That's
this
correct.
child will be in the ICU.
That's correct. That's been the justification in the past for allowing that exception. Just bringing it to your
Yeah.
attention, see, okay.
Okay. All right, so we'll let Tammy know to inform UHC that that is the wishes of the board. The second one is to not piggyback on childcare, but also from the ARPA framework that was brought before you. The plan was originally, I think, to have Matt Schnipke come in front of you next week, but knowing that I think one of you is going to be out of town, I just wanted to kind of get your direction. Is a piece of the framework was working with the city of Middletown on the sports and entertainment venue. If you're aware, the town mall has been pretty vacant for a significant amount of time, and to really front door that and change the image of a corridor, a significant corridor along the Interstate 75. We've been moving forward with that, and we are to the point now where we need to do a feasibility, a market study to really sort of proof out the size and the scope of that entertainment venue. We have a lot of partners that have come into play for that. We have an investment group that is looking to do a sports franchise, a Tier 2 juniors hockey team. We have a couple other groups that have committed. The landowner is willing to give the land for this entertainment venue free of charge for this. The Port Authority has been heavily involved with that. And so what Matt was going to bring to you next week is the city of Middletown went out to RFP for a group to do that study. It's a combination of a group called Hunden Community Partners. They bring in their own banking group, their design group, Perkins and Will, I think is the architectural firm. And the piece would be, our portion of that would be the ask of $73,000 from the ARPA funds to get that going. So just wanted to get your direction if that was something that you were acceptable with, since all three of you are here today. And then we can either have Matt come again a second time or just put that on the consent agenda depending on your wishes.
So what is it that are we funding some of this then? Or
It's a partnership. So the reason that we were looking at doing next Tuesday is Jim Palahniuk, the city manager of Middletown, was going in front of his council next Tuesday as well.
But we're being asked to fund or subsidize an investment by a private organization in this former mall. And then what is that?
So this would be to invest into the study to see the feasibility in the market, the feasibility and market study of this complex, what the size and the scope should be. I think.
This is just us funding a study.
Correct. To sit
But
there.
part of the ARPA funds,
Yeah.
Martin brought it forward, we were very leery of it, said we're not gonna fund it if the free market says it's not going to work, but it was one of these, it was close to working, leveraging, tourism being our #1 industry, a group of private, well-heeled investors came forward and said, we're willing to do blank, blank, and blank if we have this infrastructure in place. Middletown wants to see it. Our CVB board wants to see it. So that was initially vetted and approved during that framework. So this is the first allocation of money, which is, I think we told them, what exactly does this look like? Because these things, because I hate studies, but I know on this type of a thing, what does that look like? Because it could be this, or it could be this.
Yeah,
and there's a wide range of possibilities of what that looks like, and I think we do need a private firm that really knows what they're talking about to tell us what does this plan even look like if we're going to move forward with it.
Yeah,
Is it feasible?
It's the same thing that historically, like the CDB did relative to the sports complex. They needed to size it appropriately, and that's the thing is, you don't want it to be too small that you're not able to attract the big tourism items, but you also don't want to make it so big that you're paying for something that is not being utilized appropriately. I mean, to Commissioner Young's point is there's a group, just for instance, with the it's NAL, North American Hockey League. Just for them to submit an application to be a part of that league is $750,000. So this is a vetted group that is looking to sit there and bring a sports franchise to this area. They have, and a part of this research would be to talk to them, work with them, what are their needs, what are the costs of that, what is appropriate, how do you put that financial modeling together, how do we sit there and build something that could be transformational for the next 30, 40, 50 years for that corridor. So to Commissioner Young's point, this is that first step of really sizing it out appropriately and making sure we're hitting that sweet spot of the market. So, I mean, it would be okay just to put that on consent next week, or do you want
I've
to?
got no problem with moving forward.
I don't have
with
a
the
problem
study.
with it either.
Because again, we're not committing that, yes, we're going to spend whatever amount of the ARPA funds
Oh,
on
absolutely.
this, but we're going down the path to see, is it feasible? Should we do this? How much should we do if we do it?
Yeah, no, I mean, quite obviously, I wanted to go to the positive because the Economic Development Office has put a lot of time and effort into this. But if this pans out to be not appropriate, those monies that have been allocated in the framework could get moved to something else. Obviously, the goal would be for it to be successful and to move forward. But I would tell you is I've had the opportunity to meet with a couple of the council members. I've actually spoken in front of council on one occasion and have had an opportunity to meet with a couple of new council members. And they're very much appreciative of Warren County support, and those two council members said that this is their number one project in Middletown is to get this. They see it as their front door, and they want to make sure that it's the best front door, and so they are very appreciative and are very happy that we're willing to partner. So we'll put it on there for next week. Appreciate it.
All right, again, I open it up to anyone else, anything? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Hearing from the public?
Yeah, I thought that gentleman was going to speak, but he said he wasn't going to stay very long, so.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.